glad to be here. I'm just going to dive right in. We're talking about history. We're talking about how 80s detective shows healed the wounds of Vietnam. I'm going to start off with a truism that we've heard a lot, which is all gave some gave all. And I have a little variation on that I like to say, which is not every Vietnam vet was a 1980s TV detective. But almost every 1980s TV detective was a Vietnam vet, okay? Almost, I know, okay. I say almost for a reason. Okay, so there's three things that I'm going to try to do in this talk. We're going to get through it as best we can. We're going to prove the existence of the trope. We're going to observe some very specific examples, and we're going to wonder what it means to the viewers who saw these shows. You can remember this with a very simple acronym that I put together. There you have it. Excellent. So let's get started. In the early stages of TV in the 1960s, you did not see a lot of Vietnam vets on television. There is one show that tried to get away with it. It was, believe it or not, people wonder what was the deal when Carol got married to Mike Brady on the Brady Bunch. What happened to the husband? Sherwood Schwartz delivered a pilot script to CBS that said her husband was killed in the Vietnam War. Totally true. And CBS said, oh, no, he wasn't. Not going to put that on TV. So they cut it from the script, and they never explained what happened to him. So that solves that mystery. Our first bit of detective work of the night. All right. In the 1970s, there's Hawaii Five-0. You start getting more Vietnam vets on television, but here's the bad news. They're shown as crazed gunmen and snipers and guys with hooks for hands holding a hospital hostage. So you do get a lot of Vietnam vets, but they're portrayed as the villain of the week, and they're arrested by the guys from Hawaii Five-0 or Barnaby Jones or whoever. It's a sad time and difficult for veterans who are watching these shows when they come home. 1980s, this is it, right? This is the goal. I like to call it a golden age, not the golden age, because I'm hopeful for the future. But this is a golden age of Vietnam vet detectives. But I want to just distinguish, for the purpose of time, I'm going to just focus on the private investigators, not the police. I have some reasons for this, but I'll throw you a bone. I'll give you a footnote. If you want a good cop show that has a Vietnam episode, check out Miami Vice Back in the World, Season 2, directed by Don Johnson. And Sonny Crockett finds out that there was an evil sergeant right before the fall of Saigon who was taking the bodies of GIs who were killed in action, and he was stuffing their bodies with heroin for when the bodies were sent back to the States. And that's how he started his drug cartel. So Sonny Crockett decides he's going to get to the bottom of this and go get the guy. And here he's going up the river in a boat. Very Apocalypse Now. And we're going to see one of the guys working for him is wearing black pajamas like a Vietnamese soldier. And you probably heard, if you heard, there was a Doors song in that. The episode has 6 songs by the Doors. And I want you to just put that in context for a second. That's 1/3 the number of Doors song in the movie The Doors. But also, if you do the math, an episode of Miami Vice is 48 minutes, which is 1/3 the total runtime of the movie The Doors. So minute per song ratio, it's holding its own use of Doors songs. So that's how they show their hand. This is a Vietnam episode. Okay, let's get back to the topic at hand, which is the Vietnam vet detectives, the private eyes. I think one of the big important things that you have to realize in these shows is that they're using their special skills that they honed in the war. Let's look at this clip from Simon and Simon.
These boots could belong to anybody.
There's only one shoe store in the world where you can get a set exactly like that. Vietnam.
Apparently these boots are only available in Vietnam, and Simon knows this. This is classic detective work. He's got the magnifying glass on the shoe print. So that's great. Other detectives we see are the Riptide guys were military police. They were MPs. Howling Mad Murdoch from the A-Team honed his skills as a pilot when he was in the war. Magnum PI, I'm so embarrassed. I can never remember what his special skill was.
And you was the best guy ever seen at going behind the lines and coming back with the scalps.
That's it. He was the best at getting the scalps of the enemy soldiers. Of course. Of course. That's what you want in your title character in a primetime CBS detective show. He's got mad skills. Okay. So the other thing that's so key to all these shows is it's really about integration and becoming a detective as a way to reintegrate into society. And there's two things I'm going to pay attention to. One is in Raymond Chandler's detective novels, you had somebody like Philip Marlowe who didn't belong to society. He could go to rich clients and then he'd go get information on Skid Row from a shoeshine boy. The detective moves up and down the social ladder. He's fluid. He doesn't belong to his society. He's an outsider. And the Vietnam vet captured that better than anybody, because when they came home, I'm going to give you a comparison. When soldiers came home from World War II, they would be in these big steamer ships. It would take several days to cross the Atlantic Ocean. They'd be returning victoriously from Europe. They'd be with hundreds and thousands of other soldiers who were with them. It would take several days across the ocean to decompress that experience. For a soldier in Vietnam, you would be in the jungle getting shot at in the morning. In the afternoon, you were in the airport in Saigon. By evening, you were landing in San Francisco, not really being welcomed by open arms. So the reintegration process was totally different because of the technology of the late 60s, early 70s. So that's part of why you have the Vietnam vet as the outsider. We'll get back to the funny clips, I promise. Here's one example of how they're still reconciling the war. This is another clip from that same episode of Simon and Simon.
I hadn't seen anything like this since war.
So what we've got is a boot print, some war stories about crazies in Vietnam, and all of a sudden, you're sure he's an ex-Marine.
There's no such thing as an ex-Marine.
There's no such thing as an ex-Marine. And so therefore, you're never done with the war, right? You're never done with the Vietnam War if you're still a Marine. So that's one of the things they're still processing as they solve kidnapping cases and jewel thief crimes. The other thing you see on almost every one of these shows is that the Vietnam buddy shows up that normally a detective might have to turn down a case, like, I can't do that. But when a guy who saved your ass in Da Nang needs a favor, you're going to take that case. And that happens in almost all the Vietnam vet detective shows. The gumshoe is outsider we talked about. Nobody articulates this better than this clip from TV's The Equalizer. This is one of my favorites.
I was wondering if you'd like to come over for dinner.
I better pass on that.
I'd like to get to know you better.
You wouldn't.
Oh, you guys know why, right? Because The Equalizer has seen some shit, okay? And The Equalizer has done some shit, okay? That brings us to our next question. What did they do in Vietnam? We never get the exact details, but it's more like implied that The Equalizer was involved with some really bad stuff, and when he came back to America, he wanted to atone for the sins of Vietnam by becoming like a very accessible and available detective who could help out people who were in trouble. So that's the backstory there. The A-Team, you all know what they did in Vietnam. They talk about it in the opening of every single episode of the show. Crack Commando Unit, say it with me.
In 1972, a crack commando unit was sent to prison by a military court for a crime they didn't commit.
They were sentenced for a crime they didn't commit, guys, okay? There was a lot of bad stuff being done in Vietnam, but they had nothing to do with it. Now, as I did the research, I think the most shocking thing I came across in my research was from an episode of the 4th season of the A-Team. Pay very close attention to this clip. It blew my mind.
Morrison, what about him? He's the officer that you claim sent you on the mission to rob the Bank of Hanoi. The mission that you got locked up on.
The A-Team totally did that crime, guys. The A-Team robbed the Bank of Hanoi, and they spent 4 seasons in the opening credits saying that it didn't happen. It's very Vietnam to blur the truth and the lies, and you don't know what to believe anymore. So I commend the show for bringing those things together. Thomas Magnum, it's a little bit dark. Thomas Magnum was a POW in Vietnam. You can see him here. He's in a cage. So yes, even though he did cross enemy lines and he came back with the scalps, he was put into a cage where he was tortured for a long period of time. And when he came back after his experience, he was bitter towards the government. And that's the thing we see in a lot of these detectives is a distrust of authority. It's articulated here.
Mac was a big boy. He knew the risks.
Like I did?
All right, now take it easy.
Don't tell me what to do, Admiral. I'm not one of your boys anymore.
So that's a big theme in the Magnum show is his tense relationship. He has to go to naval intelligence to try to get information when he's working on a case, but he really doesn't like the military institution, and he has a lot of bitterness and complicated feelings towards the military as a whole. But nobody sums this up better than this character from an episode of Simon and Simon. And again, this is very much the scenario you'd see in something in the 70s show of the villain, of the guy who, in this case, is taking a theme park hostage. But the detectives side with him because he is right.
When you called the raid on Sean Look, you knew that we were sitting right under it, didn't you, sir? Are you going to believe the official report on this Section 8?
I don't know about you guys, but I'll take a Section 8 over official report any day. Anybody who was over there knows about official reports, don't they? What are you going to believe? What you see with your own eyes and hear with your own ears and feel in your own gut? Or a piece of paper with a bunch of numbers on it, and yesterday those numbers were your best buddies.
Okay, I know by today's standards that does sound a little Alex Jonesy. I'll admit, but in 1985, that was a legitimate point of view to bring to the table. Okay, that was part of the national conversation. And it just, again, speaks to the idea that the Vietnam vet does not believe the official report because he knows from his own experiences that there's always more to the story. There's digging to do. There's detective work to be done. So I said I would talk about the police versus the private eye, and that distinguish, yes, this is from The Big Lebowski. So the big central difference is it's about what is the goal, what is their intent, and what is the goal that they have to carry out. So there's a beautiful song lyric in a song by Billy Bragg where the character is being sentenced to jail, and the character says, "I cried, there is no justice as they led me out the door. The judge said, this isn't a court of justice, son. This is a court of law." And that's the difference. The police are there to enforce the law, to uphold the status quo, and to protect the society as it exists, whereas the private detective wants something more. They seek justice. It's a higher calling. It's not just enforcing the laws. And again, The Equalizer has some really good back and forth dialogue that throws this down. Take a look.
You know, you could destroy that tape on landing.
No, you could. I still have to work within the confines of that bureaucratic machinery that you hate so much. The tapes will go to a Senate committee, right?
You know what that'll do to him?
Yes, I know.
Yeah, then we know what the Senate's going to do. We know what the red tape's going to do. I'm not such a big fan of independent government councils right now myself, so I can relate. But that's where The Equalizer's coming from. So they're fighting injustice, and it begs the question, what is the ultimate injustice that they were fighting against? And, of course, that is the Vietnam War itself. That was a huge injustice for so many Americans, especially the guys who fought there. So with each case that they take on where they're trying to fight injustice, they're dealing with their own past. They're working out, they're processing their own personal history with being in the war. No character, I'm going to go outside the realm of TV for a second because no character spoke to this more than John Rambo in the film First Blood 2, Rambo.
Sir, do we get to win this time?
This time it's up to you.
Everybody always remembers, do we get to win this time? But the answer is this time it's up to you, because that implies that last time it wasn't up to you. It was up to the government who did a bad job with it. It was up to the bureaucrats who sent you into the war with one arm tied behind your back. You couldn't really win the war. And it was the fault of the American people who didn't support the troops and didn't support the war. That, again, I don't agree with that, but that was very popular thinking in 1985. So that's historical context of where the Rambo films and their popularity is coming from. It was so popular that they made sequels. You had the Chuck Norris knockoffs, Missing in Action, and the ripple effect was it showed up in a lot of these TV shows. Let's take a look.
Police, our daughter is dating Rambo.
Okay, not the show I had in mind, but I think it supports the general idea that the success and the influence of Rambo is really huge. But here's one that I thought was relevant to our studies. It's the Jungle Rescue episode of Magnum, where it says he returns to Vietnam to bring a buddy missing in action, like Chuck Norris, out alive. Let's take a look at that.
Tyler!
Totally goes full Rambo. Look at that side by side. It's like you take John Rambo. It's like, how can you make him even more macho? Give him big mustache. So you see the Rambo influence playing out. And it's like Rambo and Magnum have a similar experience that they go back, they find meaning, they serve justice, and they get to win this time. It's the ultimate do-over. It's the wish fulfillment. We all have something in our lives that we'll feel terrible about. We wish we could go back in time and do it over and do it right this time. And that's what so much of this wish fulfillment is in these movies and TV shows. Now, Magnum was not the only TV show to go back in Vietnam. Who knows what the second one was? That's right. It was the A-Team. Of course it was the A-Team. A year after Magnum went, they did the season 4 finale. It was The Sound of Thunder. So they get to go in country. They're firing grenades. Nothing invokes the fall of Saigon like stuntmen hanging from a helicopter, throwing guys out helicopters, blowing things up. This is a big deal for primetime television in 1986, right? A guy actually dies in an episode of the A-Team. I read a blogger review who's like, somebody actually died in this episode. So apparently that speaks to the demo. What I love is that when they first land and they go to the hotel, they have each of the characters in a montage go to their hotel room and stare at a ceiling fan. I'm not going to show you all 4 examples because it's, we have a lot to get through still. But generally speaking, when a character stares at a ceiling fan, it's an Apocalypse Now reference or, an homage. But rather than dwell on that sequence, I want you to pay very close attention to this next line of dialogue spoken by B.A. Baracus. I want everyone to be quiet. Listen very closely to what B.A. has to say about their experience.
Looks like we're back in Vietnam for no reason.
Okay. I put the screen cap on and closed captioning. I want everyone to say it with me. 1, 2, 3. Looks like we're back in Vietnam for no reason. Okay, I watched this several times. I'm still not sure how to interpret it. There's 2 possible interpretations I have. 1, we are back in Vietnam and for no good reason. Or is it, we are back in Vietnam and we are again here for no good reason? Which one is it?
I don't know.
I have no idea. I talked to a friend of mine who was an English professor, and I was like, I'm trying to get the interpretation right, man. And he's like, I think the writers were cleverly letting it play both ways, which I think is a good interpretation, but not the satisfying answer I want. And it reminds me of a T-shirt. I don't know if other people have seen this T-shirt. It drives me crazy because I don't understand the intention. Is it supposed to be, this is my party shirt? Or is it, hey, dude, come on, we're going out. I thought you were going to dress up and wear your party shirt. This is my party shirt. Which is it?
I don't know.
All right, let's get back to the A-Team. So they finish their mission successfully. They rescue Tia Carrera. They bring her back to the States and give her a Hollywood makeover. But not without ending on another bafflingly, seemingly poignant final line to the episode that I cannot make heads or tails of, but I'm going to play for you all right now. Listen closely to what Hannibal says to Murdoch.
Colonel, can I ask you a question? Before we went back, did you think about it?
I remembered it. But I didn't think about it.
I think we're all with Murdoch on this one, right? Which is, what does that even mean, Hannibal? Tune in next season to find out what Hannibal meant. I think the A-Team needs to just put the heavy stuff aside and focus on what it's good at, which is goofy shenanigans and lying to the kids watching for 4 seasons. Okay, so I think the thing it comes down to with a lot of 80s TV shows is the tension that exists in a lot of popular 80s TV is, will they or won't they? That's the question. That's the thing driving you episode to episode before there were season-long arcs. It's the tension, will they or won't they? And with Vietnam shows, I think it means something else. It's, will they or won't they snap? Will they or won't they successfully reintegrate into society peacefully? And I have 3 examples of how shows either ended or wanted to end the series. We're going to start with The Equalizer. This didn't get a finale per se, but I did find this on a Reddit discussion board where somebody asked the creator, they did an AMA with the creator of The Equalizer, and they said, I don't recall if the show had a proper conclusion. I don't recall if the show had a proper conclusion. How would you have wanted to end the series? And I love this answer. He says, we didn't have a proper conclusion. We became pawns in a war between Universal and CBS over Angela Lansbury and Murder, She Wrote. I love that even when talking shop, the guy compares his industry to an unjust war. I think that is so on brand. But he does say, I would want McCall, the equalizer, to give his life for someone else and his death to find redemption. And again, the karmic journey that the equalizer was on, that would make so much sense that he's giving his life after the terrible things he did, after the lives he took, that he could make someone else's life better through his own death. Great ending of the equalizer. I'm sorry that Murder, She Wrote screwed the whole thing up. What can you do? Second, this is the final episode of Magnum from the last season. It's Rick's wedding. Nobody knows where Magnum is. He's supposed to be there at the wedding. He doesn't show up, and then suddenly this happens.
Lawfully wedded husband. To love and to honor. For better or for worse.
So the wedding episode is not just about Rick getting married, because nobody really cares about Rick getting married. It's about Thomas Magnum renewing his vows with the Navy. He makes the decision that he'd been wasting like 8 years in Hawaii driving around in a sports car solving crimes when he could better use his skills to re-up and serve his country in the Navy. And just as he says that, he reveals it to TC, you hear the priest say, "For better or for worse." So I think it's a really nice, very smart and thoughtful and kind of heartwarming way to end a very pro-military message to the Magnum show for the guy in the Hawaiian shirts. And then we've got the A-Team, which I don't think they were quite as focused with how they wanted the show to end, but I'll let you decide by watching this promo.
This Friday, for the very first time, the fate of the A-Team will be in your hands. You at home will tell us how the episode should end. Friday.
Did anybody see that episode? Did you vote? I'm guessing you called in. The guy had 2 phones out, so the A-Team didn't really know how they were going to end it, but I think I've done everything I set out to do with proving the existence, observing details, wondering what it means. I'm going to end with one final clip, which is from a very sad, meaningful, poignant ending of an episode of Simon and Simon. It's a Vietnam veteran came back. He was a Marine. He was exposed to Agent Orange, which would have been very topical, very meaningful. So they end the episode with a very sad funeral. But there's one thing. The actor they cast as the priest is Olan Soule, who a lot of you are not going to know by his name or his face, but I'm going to give you a clue. He was the voice of Batman for almost 20 years, ladies and gentlemen. The Super Friends Batman delivered the eulogy, which I think on a detective show is actually quite fitting, because Batman is the world's greatest detective. So here it is, the big funeral delivered by Batman.
Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil. My cup runneth over.
The game is over, toy man.
The game is over, and so is the talk, everybody. Thank you so much.
Go to nerdnight.com to find a Nerd Night event near you. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for our latest presentation.